Hey, good afternoon. It's Matt Green. This is Real Insights Live. Today I'm with Dick Dillingham and we're discussing Quantum Leap. Super excited about today's show. Quantum Leap is really interesting. It's developed by Gary Keller, co-founder and chairman of the board for Keller Williams Realty International, the largest real estate company in the world. And the thing I like about today's show is it's a great segue or continuation of our discussion from last week with Julie Facer and Jack Canfield's Success Principles, in that it's really not about real estate at all. It's going to be super relevant for anybody that's joining us today. It's about the power principles and disciplines that can help anyone achieve a more abundant life. It's about living with purpose and direction. I'd like to remind you, as you participate in today's call, feel free to leave questions and comments down below. I look forward to any opportunities that we have to share and discuss things that are of importance to you and respond to questions. I want to make sure that we thank our sponsor today, Troy Thompson from Nook and Cranny Home Inspections. This guy is just absolutely phenomenal. Their team has been in business for nearly 3 decades here in Utah. Just rock solid home inspector all along the Wasatch Front. He does stuff down for our team down in St. George and does a phenomenal job. And of course, everywhere here up in northern Utah. I'd highly recommend that you check him out and connect with him for your home inspection needs. You can find them at their website, nook-n-cranny.com. So nook-n, like the letter N, -cranny with a K.com. And you can reach him on his phone number at 801-698-6467. That's 801-698-6467. Please tell him that you heard about us, heard about him here. Let him know that Matt Green suggested that you call. We would super appreciate it. And thank you for Troy, who's always just a great sponsor of our Keller Williams events, and certainly for the show today. So we're going to jump right into this. My guest, as I mentioned, is someone who I just have a tremendous amount of respect for. Very excited because I think he, as I said in my earlier Facebook Live event this morning, probably one of the great minds in real estate. And so just flattered that he'd join us today and talk about, I think, one of the most interesting discussions, which is kind of a self-reflection. So Dick, thank you for joining the call today.
Thank you, Matt. Very excited.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, maybe just start out with sharing with us a little bit about your professional career path and your current role with Keller Williams International.
Okay. I started off in residential real estate in 1977. So if you're doing the math, that's a little over 40 years ago. Actually, I'm coming up to my 41st anniversary on April Fools.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know if that was foretelling the future, but 40 plus years ago, I got started in residential real estate, and I was with a traditional company. I was an agent. Back the first really month, I mean, even before I joined, I met a guy named Mike Brody. That's how I met Mike Brody. I was interviewing with the manager of the office, and it was a female who was single and quite wealthy, financially speaking. And I said, do you know somebody I could talk to before I make this commitment who's more like me, you know, male, married, kids, and broke? And she said, absolutely, you should meet Mike Brody. And that's how I met Mike Brody, who's still my business partner today.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a great story.
I got into management, and then Mike and I left that company and started our own company. And we grew that company to over 150 agents. We sold that company. And 4 years later, we went to work for a 100% company. And then in 1995, I joined Keller Williams. Now, Mike had joined in 94. When I joined in 95, there were about 1,800 agents worldwide. It was an amazing company even back then. I felt like there was a great chance to just do some unbelievable things. I remember one of the quotes that Gary Keller tossed out when I was brand new with the company. He said, this company has a chance to make history. Holy cow, look where we are now.
That early, that was his vision.
That's a pretty bold statement when you're 1,800 agents.
Right.
You know, we weren't really on anyone's radar to speak of. So I joined Keller in 95. I joined as an agent, and actually temporarily, that's not totally true. Temporarily, I was the interim regional director for North Texas, New Mexico. And I worked for Althea Osborne. She was the operating partner for North Texas, New Mexico. Curiously enough, I will tell you this was interesting. Keller Williams failed in Dallas the first time. That's where I am. I'm in Dallas, Texas. I've been here since I graduated from SMU. So I just liked Dallas and I stayed here. So that's where I started in residential real estate. But Keller Williams actually failed in their first attempt in Dallas, which is always kind of surprising to the people who think, oh, you're in Texas, you've got it kind of made because everybody knew who Keller was. Well, not so much in the early days. But anyway, so in 95, I started as the interim regional director. Later, Mike and I opened the Plano Market Center. I got involved in market center ownership, 2 or 3 market centers early on. And then in the late 1990s, 98, 99, we started developing the Northern California region. Later, it became the Northern California, Hawaii region. We noticed that Hawaii wasn't in anyone's region, and we took a long and careful study of whether or not we wanted Hawaii to be a part of our region. And in about 60 seconds, we said, yes, absolutely. We want that to be a part of our region.
Yeah, I'm sure you all fight over who does business meetings
right.
with your group in Hawaii.
So I'm the operating partner for Northern California, Hawaii. The regional director for that region, as you know, is Tony Brody, kind of a common name there. That's Mike's son. Mike is the operating partner for the Maryland, D.C. region, of which I am an investor. And we co-own the Plano Market Center, and then we have a couple of other investments in Keller Williams. So that's kind of where things are. In about 1996, Gary Keller started Keller Williams University. And I was one of the original 11 or 12 people to start Keller Williams University. And so I started teaching for Keller Williams on kind of a formal basis. Prior to that, I was teaching for CRS, which is the designation, NAR's designation, Certified Residential Specialist. Well, once I started teaching for Keller Williams, I retired from CRS because I really had invested my total future in the growth of Keller Williams. And so I wanted to become pretty purposeful about teaching for Keller Williams University.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and I think, I mean, for those that aren't familiar, Keller Williams over the last handful of years has been recognized as the #1 training company in the world, and then was just added to Training Magazine's Hall of Fame. And
right.
So to see what that Keller Williams University grew into relative to the training and coaching that this company provides both for agents and leadership is just pretty remarkable. So it's neat to hear that you were in the starting of that. One of the things that you said to me in that opening that I think is insightful is, and I think sometimes we fail to remember this, and Gary, I think, will be the first to admit it when you hear him really talk as he starts to talk about his personal life and some of this material around Quantum Leap, is that Keller Williams was really a series of failures, right? And he talks a little bit about how right out of the gate, even when he was as small as those 15 or 1,800 agents, that he had such clarity in his vision that he was answering the phone, the Keller Williams International, right? Headquarters for Keller Williams International. And he right out of the gate had that vision and never saw failure as the stopping point or the destination, but really just, part of the process. Right. So before we really dive into some of the details of, this application and the ideas that make up Quantum Leap, would you provide us with just a 2-minute overview of what this material is really about?
Yeah, sure. In some ways, it takes a little bit to figure it out. It's certainly about having the best life you can possibly have. It's about reaching your potential. Use the term abundance, about having an abundant life. And that's the way I described it. I would describe it as a class on how to have the best life possible. And as the more I've thought about it and the more I've taught the class, it's about how to have a purposeful life. And to have a purposeful life, to have anything that's purposeful, any task that you take on where you want to become more purposeful, the very first step, I think, almost always for being purposeful is to enrich your thinking. So I think you have to think about your life I remember when I was first in the business, Matt, I don't know that I thought about my life. I don't know that I thought about my long-term goals as much as I probably should have. And in all honesty, I was kind of in a survival mode. Mm. I just needed to make enough money, sell enough houses to pay our bills, to provide for my family. If I look back on that, I wish I had been a little more introspective along the way. But fortunately, from that day to now, I have been. So it's about being more purposeful about your own life. We talk about being purposeful about your business all the time in our company. And I don't know that we talk as much as we should about being purposeful about your life. And so that's what this class is about. It's a challenge. It's a series of opportunities for you to become more thoughtful, more purposeful about your own life.
Yeah. I remember really specifically this moment that I had while I was sitting in this class a number of years ago, first time taking the course. And I remember, and I think most people have had this experience at some level, but just sitting there thinking, man, I wish Heidi, who's my wife, was here with me. I wish my son, who at that time was just coming into his teenagers, was with me, right? And it's just that great opportunity where you start to have that inner reflection, and you're like, wow, who is it that I wish was with me, because the content is so powerful.
Right.
I know and maybe this is still the case, but there's only a handful of people that really teach this within our company, you being one of them.
Right.
What was it that was so compelling when you first started engaging in this content that got you so excited about this material that you became so deeply committed to it?
Well, somehow I knew you'd ask me that question, and I'm not sure you're going to be prepared for the answer. I started teaching this class kicking and screaming. When I got a call from the dean of Keller Williams University at the time, and he said, "Dick, congratulations. You are our first instructor to be requested." Now, I mean, I was pretty proud of that, and I felt pretty good about that. And I said, "Well, great. Well, what do they want me to teach?" And he said, "Well, they want you to teach Quantum Leap." Now, remember that up until that moment, no one had taught Quantum Leap other than Gary. And it's a course that Gary put together. He authored, basically. And I said, there's a mistake here. I believe I told you in our little survey that we did at our last meeting that was one course I did not want to teach. And I said, the reason I don't want to teach it is I've got a lot of work to do on my own life before I feel like I can teach others. I said it a little more graphically, but that'll do for our today's
PG rating.
Yes, and the dean of the university said, "Dick, we're all working on our lives. It's a matter of it's just a matter of, are you on the journey? And we believe you are on the journey. You've come to the class 5 times. You ask questions. You take notes. You're paying attention. We can see it in your behavior. You are on the journey, and that's really the key to sharing and helping others." And frankly, Matt, I really couldn't say much, because that was true. I was on the journey. And so the first time I taught Quantum Leap was in New Orleans, Louisiana. I was very nervous, and the first question I asked the class was, I said, "How many of you have taken Quantum Leap?" Fortunately, not one hand went up. So I was able to share with them that this would be the best Quantum Leap they'd ever had.
That's awesome.
So, but sometimes everything happens for a reason, right? There's no coincidences, and that was one of the most fortuitous things that ever happened to me, to be selected to teach Quantum Leap. And so I taught the first 4 or 5 years, maybe even a little longer, and I was the only person teaching it other than Gary. And now you're right, we have 4 to 6 people who teach it, different amounts, but I probably still teach it the most number of times, or the most frequently. And the transformation in my life has just been really a blessing to me, and astonishing to me when I look at it going all the way back, and what I know now compared to what I knew then about myself. Initially, I didn't think I was a very interesting subject. Now I realize, I don't know if I'm interesting, but I'm certainly complex.
So Gary Keller says, if you're not living your own life, you're living someone else's. And this really becomes one of the critical elements of starting that self-work that he talks. He poses this question, whose life are you living?
Mm-hmm.
Will you talk about your thoughts on this and the power of taking that time to block out some one-on-one time with yourself, right? And do that personal reflection and do this personal work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was, and as I think back about that, when I was younger, which meant when I had fewer of life's experiences, I think I was taking my cues from my environment, from my family, from my friends. I remember the first job I took after college. When I graduated from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do as an undergraduate, so I went on and got my master's degree. And then wasn't sure I knew what I wanted to do, but a PhD was out of the question. So I took a job, and I took a job that I thought, well, this job is kind of cool, and people will be impressed that I'm doing this. See, that's the wrong reason to take a job. And that's leading a life that's pleasing to others. And not surprisingly, I failed at that job, because that job wasn't right for me. So I sort of tucked my tail, and I went off into the corner and got a job at one of the largest banks in Dallas, and just kind of, frankly, I just worked for 3 years there and sort of developed some maturity. And that's when I went into residential real estate. And I went into residential real estate with the belief, I really was a lot more critical in terms of my thinking. I was a lot more I investigated it more from the standpoint of, is this something that I'll like? Is this something that I can succeed in? Is this something that I can feel proud about? And an interesting byproduct of that was, in the early days, I viewed myself not as a real estate salesperson, but as a real estate service provider. And that was a major turning point, just to align my thinking with my beliefs, because I've always been an encourager. I've always tried to provide service or help to others. And that little mind shift to being in the customer service business, I really give that a lot of credit for my success. And that's not, by the way, not everybody's going to feel the same way. You've got to figure out who you are.
Right. You've got to get clarity on what your own values are, and then make sure that your activities align with those values.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. This material has been so beneficial for me. I've got a son who's 18, graduated this last year. And you know, at that time when you're graduating and starting to consider college and work and different things, it's an interesting time in life. Up to that point, all of his decisions were essentially made for him, really. It's like, this is the next step. This is the next step.
Right.
And it's interesting as you start to have dialogue with those kids at that age, it was very surreal to hear some of the influences of the decisions that he was trying to make or navigate based on what he perceived as the expectations that his parents might have for him, or grandparents might have for him, or whatever. And this material really helps me have such, I think, a meaningful conversation with him around designing his own life and not building a life based on the expectations of others, but really what's important to him, and start making decisions based on better criteria versus what are the expectations that either the culture creates or my family's created. It's been very powerful for us.
You know, Matt, and it's funny you would say that. It brings a story to mind. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but you know, there was a day in my day, college was a good example. Going to college was a good example of an expectation that was put upon high schoolers. Well, you graduate from high school, and then of course you're going to go to college. Well, in today's time, that's not quite the given that it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago. and I'm not talking about across the board, but by people who could afford to send their kids to college, that was sort of an expectation. I remember a friend of mine whose son quit college during the middle of his freshman year. And my friend was so upset with him and so distraught. And he made this comment to me. He said, if he just knew how much I would have given to have had that chance. And then I thought, well, what difference does it make how much you would have given? It's his life. It's really kind of an interesting perspective when you think that Michael Dell, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs never finished college.
Well, who would want to have a life like those guys?
Well, yeah, that's right.
That's questionable.
That's right.
Yeah, great point. So Gary talks a little bit about the importance of building our internal world before we, see that played out in real life. Will you talk just a little bit about that and how that's integrated into this conversation?
That's really a fascinating thought. If you haven't thought about it or haven't realized it, it's actually pretty straightforward. And he begins, or the belief is, everything happens twice. Everything happens twice. The first time, it happens in your mind. It's a byproduct of your thinking. It's how you think. And then the second time it happens, it's the deed. It's out in the world, so to speak. There's a great story about the famous mystery writer Alfred Hitchcock, and he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said to him, Mr. Hitchcock, how is it that you were able to write so many fascinating mysteries? And he said, well, actually, it was quite easy. I just thought them up and then copied them down. And that's really, when you think about it, in our world, in the real estate world, you have people who see a vacant piece of ground, and in their mind, they see houses, or in their mind, they see shopping center, or an office building, or a golf course. And they see it before they build it. And you can go all the way, look what Gary's vision was. What did he see? He saw an international company. He saw a company that was a major player, a company that was going to make history. He saw it before we did it. And so you look at that, and then you think about it this way. You say, well, that applies, by the way, that applies to bad thinking too. Good thoughts lead to good deeds. But the counter to that is bad thoughts lead to bad deeds. You are a product of your own thinking. Good deeds lead to a good reputation. And so that reputation, when you trace it all the way back, is strictly a byproduct of how you think. And then you get into, well, how you think can be affected by who you let in your circle. So if I believe, and I do strongly, that you're a product of your environment, so who do you hang out with? You hang out with people that you want them to be models for you. But you also hang out with people who will fill your mind with enabling thoughts. Not disarming thoughts or disabling thoughts, but enabling thoughts, powerful thoughts. It's very, very important. And when you look back at the people in your life and you see the ones that added to your thinking in a positive way, and then probably most of us have people in our lives who in the past, hopefully not the present, but could be past or present, actually detract from our lives because of what they're saying to us, or what they're allowing to put into our mind, what we're allowing them to put into our mind.
Yeah. I'm reading Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect right now. And it was interesting as he kind of touched on this and the power of us doing certain activities and thinking certain ways and how that really shows up, dramatically over a period of time. And we've done it for weeks and weeks and weeks and so forth. And,
right.
and he talks a little bit about this, this process of getting how we create it first spiritually or in our mind, right? From intelligence, we get clarity on what it is that we want, or the life that we want, and he uses the example of how, when we decide that we have a certain car brand that we want to buy, all of a sudden we see them everywhere. Yeah. And he said, the idea around like the book, the gift, or whatever, things show up for you when you visualize it clearly enough. Yes. It's not really all that kind of hokey pokey type of thing when you think about it. Those things are already out in the world. It's just there's so many things bombarding our thoughts and vying for our time and energy that until we get clarity within our own mind, we kind of just look right past those things. Our mind is designed to not get so overly complicated with the billions of pieces of data that we have to process every day. So our mind kind of sees past those things until we design within our mind and get clarity on what we want and our values. Then those things suddenly start showing up in a big way. They're already there. Right. But our mind is really identifying them and attracting them. Yes. Or identifying them, right?
At family reunion this past year, just last week at the cultural summit, they had a speaker at the cultural summit who has spoken to us before, Clint Swindoll.
He was great.
Yes, I thought he was fabulous too. One of the things he said, live with a sense of celebration. And it reminded me of something Mary Tennant, our former president, said. She said, at a certain stage, celebrate everything. And what Clint talked about is once you have this mindset of celebration, he said, you'll be surprised at how many events come across or come to your realization, your consciousness, that could be celebrated. Mm-hmm. It's that same, as Diana talks about the Raz, it's really the Raz. You start thinking about something and it shows up everywhere. It's a fascinating, one of the great quotes or ahas that we use in Quantum Leap is the mind is a great servant, but a cruel master. Mm. And so it shows what a slippery slope it is for you either to have control of your mind or for your mind to have control over you. In the 6 personal perspectives, which is a very thinking-oriented set of guidelines, the top people, the successful people who gave that research to Gary to develop the 6 personal perspectives, listed their number one challenge as keeping a positive mindset. And when you hear them say keeping a positive mindset, you realize right away that a positive mindset isn't necessarily permanent. We've all seen that. You can go from the top of the world in terms of positive thinking to the bottom in a nanosecond. It's fragile, it's fleeting, and it's a continual battle to keep your mind in a very high place, in a very positive place, in a very enabling place.
And don't you think that one of the values in having this conversation and committing to some of these strategies is developing those skills to combat exactly that, right? To keep our mind in that space.
Yes. I think there's a certain discipline involved, the discipline of your thoughts, being disciplined about your thoughts. I also think, Matt, there's a certain awareness. There's a certain awareness about this whole thing. If you had not even thought of our conversation, let's say you were just listening in and you'd never really thought about how important your thinking was, well, the first thing that happens is you've got a new level of awareness. And that's all well and good, but now what are you going to do with that new level of awareness? You have to put it into practice. You have to apply it. And that's where some level of discipline or some amount of being habitual, creating habits around your thinking, that's where that comes into play.
Yeah.
That's really where change takes place. But it starts with awareness.
I remember during that first Quantum Leap that I attended, one of the things that was so impactful to me at that time that I really absolutely committed to not living these 3 stages that Gary talks about. So the 3 stages of life being learning, earning, and living. And, we've seen this within our culture for so many years where people say, you get your education and then you go and really focus on work. And then it's after that work career at 65 or whatever that you retire and go enjoy your life. Right. And the shortcomings of having that thought process and that paradigm and waiting till that point to enjoy your kids and your family and the world around us and all these things. And I just thought, I'm not going to live that life. I'm committing today to not do that. Right. And so would you talk a little bit about, what Gary's thoughts and the discussion that we really get into relative to that concept?
Yeah. Another way to label that, and this is fascinating to me too, is the world of learning, the world of working, and then the world of playing. So it's the same thing you're talking about, but the terminology is slightly different: learning, working, playing. And the reality is, there's several things that Gary talks about, how a lot of us have almost compartmentalized our lives so that we maybe get an imbalance of each of those at certain stages in our life. And it creates a certain boredom, it creates a certain burnout. And quite frankly, what you're doing is you're postponing, in many cases, think of it as postponing your joy. Postponing your joy. And so you get to this retirement age and you've worked hard going through school to get a good job, and you've worked hard at your job and you've gotten several promotions and you've built up a 401k, and you and your spouse are looking forward to travel and all this. And suppose you're physically no longer able to travel, or suppose something happened in the market or something happened to your company along the way, which, by the way, there are several companies that we could use as examples. And I tell the story about you get an email from your employer and it says, I have some bad news and I have some terrible news. The bad news is we're out of business and you don't have a job. The terrible news is, in trying to save the company, we spent your retirement. WorldCom was an example of that. JP Morgan, I think, was an example of that. There's been, I don't want to mention the wrong companies, but there have been several companies that have gone under and taken the retirement funds of their employees with them. So there you are at 60 or 65, ready to retire, ready to play, ready to live life, and you have no money.
That's a harrowing thought.
Yes. It's not, actually, I can remember, it's not so harrowing at 25.
Right.
At 25 years old, so what? I'll just do it again. There's a quote in the book Grit, and it says, Angela Duckworth is the author of that book, and it says, imagine if tomorrow when you woke up, you had lost everything. What would you do? Well, I contend one of the variables would be, how old am I? If I'm 25 years old, first, I probably didn't lose that much, but second, I've got plenty of time to make it up. But you're 35 or 45 or 55 or 65, that becomes a much, much more serious question. We aren't quite as invincible at 65 as we were at 25.
No, and we don't have time on our side anymore. I mean, I think that's,
we don't.
When we think about the compound effect, or the
right.
the way all those exercises that we go through, the one thing that allows the results to really show up in a big way is time.
Yes.
Even we talk a lot about time on task, right? They're
right.
Task over time, right? All those things have that time element, and when the time element disappears, suddenly, it's not as easy for those things.
How many studies have quoted our most precious asset is not our money, it's not our possessions, it's time.
That's right.
And I think about our business. I think we're so fortunate in so many ways to be in the real estate business. I just love this business. I've loved it for 40 years. I just love it for a lot of reasons. But I just told a group of people recently, I said, what a fantastic example. Go to family reunion, you can work, you can learn, and you can play all at the same time. It was fascinating. I say if you really plugged into any convention, you probably learned, you probably worked, and you probably played all at the same time. Well, I mean, what a great formula.
Yeah.
What a great formula.
And that needs, I mean, when we approach life correctly and really start to apply some of these principles, that can be the formula for our life right now.
Every day.
Every
yes.
day. Yeah. Talk a little bit about the 4 areas of a wealthy life that Quantum Leap starts to dive into, if you would.
Yeah, so this wasn't an original part of Quantum Leap. I mean, we didn't put it quite this way, but we have now defined and delineated the 4 areas. So you talk about life productivity, personal productivity, business productivity, and financial productivity. And one of the things we talk about is it really needs to be more or less in that order. You can't proceed with your life until you understand yourself, until you understand what your goals are, until you understand what your values are, until you understand more about yourself. What's your big why? What's your purpose? And the thought that comes to mind when I see these 4 areas really is what we talk about in bold: be, do, have, give. You have to learn who you are. You have to be aware of who you are before you know what to go out and attack, or what to go out and emphasize, or where to go find your joy. And then you have to be successful at that in order to have, and because you can't give unless you have. And you can't have unless you do. And you can't do until you know who you are, or who you be. Yeah.
Who you be. I like that. So
that's almost you can see it forwards, front to back, or back to front. It makes perfect sense that there's a natural order to these 4 categories. So I
love that concept of just, rather than what do I need to do to get those things, it's who do I need to become in order to attract those things.
Yes. Yeah. Otherwise, who you are, having mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspectives really will help guide you in life, and will help serve as a filter for all the decisions you're going to face in life. How do you know what job to take? How do you know what people to hang out with? How do you know what people not to hang out with? I mean, it's a value issue. It's a perspective issue. It's a mission, vision issue.
I had the great Mike Fleming as my coach a number of years ago, and probably one of the greatest pieces of advice that Mike gave me at that point. And this was nearly 10 years ago for me now. And I was having, a significant amount of success at the time. And Mike said, Matt, there will never be a lack of opportunity. The challenge will be making the right choices on which opportunity to pursue. And he said, it would do you a great service to get clarity in developing a filter of how you're going to make choices prior to those opportunities showing up, so that, before the emotion of the opportunity starts or whatever, you've thought through and gotten clarity on what your values are and what your mission is life, and what really gives you energy, so that when those opportunities are presented, you simply run them through the filter, and then you can ask, does this align with the things that I've identified as my mission, vision, values, etc.
Yeah, and we talk about you can't have it all, do it all, and know it all. So given that, what choices, what priorities are you prepared to make for your own life? Without any clarity about your life, that's going to be a roll of the dice.
Yeah,
it's going to be a roll of the dice. One of the things we talk about the most successful people in life simply make better choices than the rest of us. Life is nothing but making choices, making good choices. And the people who are the best at making good choices are the most successful people in life. And so what are the things I can do to increase the odds that I would make better choices? Well, you used the term clarity, and one of my favorite bold laws is clarity is power. I think that's just such a fabulous concept. Clarity brings about power to make the right choices, because you're always going to have, like Mike said, you're going to have plenty of choices to make. The question is, are you going to make the best choices, the right choices for you? I think about a new agent, and I've shared this recently because I've had coffee with several of our new agents over the last 2 or 3 months. And I would ask an agent, I would say, so you've been with us 2 or 3 months. What are you doing to get business? And one of them said to me, I'm holding houses open. I said, okay. I said, how did you reach that decision? And he looked at me and he said, well, Mary Beth does it, so I thought I will do it. And I thought, I think the decision process is slightly flawed, but it's interesting that we'll look at what other people are doing and just assume that means that's what we should be doing. And I don't think that's the best thought process to go through. You know, we talk about choices and we talk about priorities. When we talk about lead generation, we have about 8 or 9 different choices to lead generate. I'd say at least 8 or 9, but let's say the major ones would be 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So the question isn't what does Mary Beth do? The question is, what should you do? What would give you the best result? Gary had a panel on the first day of family reunion, and it felt a little mega campy to me because he had about 5 people up on stage and he interviewed them. And they were all very successful agents, and in several cases did things differently, but got to the end result. And actually the takeaway that I got is, regardless of what they were doing, one did events, one did open houses, one did farming, but they all came back to one thing: face-to-face, better contact with their database. Every one of them. So what I walked away with was they all had their own route to building their database. But as that database got built and was continuing to thrive and be built at an even higher level, they all wanted to get more face-to-face time, more personal time with their database. And when you read the Red Book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, if I were to say to you, okay, so Matt, you've got these choices for lead generation. Let's look at it from 50,000 feet. Your choices, let's take 2 choices, so the big choices. You could either deal with Mets or deal with haven't Mets. Now, Matt, you've read the book, you see the statistics, the conversion rates. Which would be the better choice? Mets. Okay, now under the category of Mets, we've got about 6 or 7 options. Which one of those fits your style? Which one do you feel good about? Which one you have the right amount of time for, the money for? And we look at all of these things and you go, whoa, I get it. I think that's how you should think.
Yeah, it makes me vividly remember a conversation I had a number of years ago with the team. Well, I was the team leader at the time in Park City, Utah. And I had this really phenomenal agent, talented person, agree to, she actually asked me, she goes, hey, I want to sit down with you and talk a little bit about my business and see if you can't give me a little coaching and insight and how I can approach this differently. And so I said, sure, I'd love to. And so we sat down and she goes, okay, I know exactly what you're going to say. And I said, you do? She goes, I know, I've got to start doing more cold calling. And I'm like, what would make you think that? And she's like, well, that's the answer, right? I've just got to do more cold calling. And I'm like, not necessarily. Like and at the end of the day, if that doesn't align with who you are and doesn't feel good, that's just not going to be sustainable over time. We've got to figure out a different lead generation strategy for you. So doing it like the guy next door or the person down the hall that's having success doing the cold calling to the FSBOs and expireds, if that is going to be miserable for you and you can't ever imagine yourself doing that, we've got to figure out a different strategy that allows you to ultimately do exactly what you're saying, is getting face-to-face and having these conversations with your sphere of influence. But there's a myriad of ways that you can do that. Right. And it's got to align with who you are and what your kind of value is and so forth, that you can allow to show up and do it day in, day out, do it well and enjoy doing it. It's just interesting to have that perspective.
You know, there was a quote. First of all, if I had to cold call, I wouldn't have lasted 3 months.
Yeah.
I would not have lasted 3 months. And I would have probably only lasted 3 months because I would have dodged the person who was asking me about my results. I could have dodged them for at least half of that time, you know? So I think about a quote from John Wooden, the famous basketball coach for UCLA, the UCLA Bruins, who coached them to like 14 national championships. And this is one of the most empowering quotes I believe I've ever heard. And he said, don't let what you can't do stop you from what you can do. And that's what we're talking about, Matt. We're talking about strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about this on our last call. One of the exercises that we do in the class, and I'm going to toss this out to everyone who's on the call or listens to the call later, you should get out a blank piece of paper, and you should just start writing down all your strengths. Write down all your strengths. Just go for it. Don't try to explain them. Just write them down. When we do that exercise in class, it's kind of fascinating to see what happens. I'll walk around the room as the people are doing this, and I'll see some people with 14, 15, 17, 20, and they're still writing. They're still writing. I see other people who've got 3 or 4, and they got their pen up by their mouth, and they're starting to kind of jitter and sweat a little bit, and they don't know where to go beyond about 3 or 4. And I'm thinking, wow, there's not that much difference in those two groups, but the difference is one of them's probably thought about it a little bit more than the other group. Then we take the exercise and we turn it around. I say, now turn that page over so you have another blank page. Write down all your weaknesses. Write down all your weaknesses. Now, once we finish that exercise, by the way, the same thing happens. It's not always the same people, but it's the same two groups. Some of them have 18, 19, 22 weaknesses. Some of them have 3. Same amount of time. And now you look at it and you say, now I want you to go back and forth from one side of that page to the other side of that page. Which one would you rather work with? Which one do you think is going to be easier? Which one do you think is going to be more fun? Which one's going to make you more successful over the long haul? So you don't do things in our business for a year. You do them for your career. And that's what you were talking about. You cannot sustain cold calling if you don't like cold calling.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, so try that exercise, strengths and weaknesses. Just go for it. Matter of fact, be really bold and share it with someone. Share your list of strengths with me, Matt. Now share your weaknesses with me, Matt. It might create some very interesting dialogue.
Yeah. I love that introspective, that time doing those exercises. So powerful, right? So one last item that I would love to connect on just a little bit in life productivity. And unfortunately, we don't have time to really get into personal productivity, business productivity, financial productivity, all like just incredible content and things that, we'll leave that for those that come to the class that we have coming up in a number of weeks. But talk a little bit about the 5 key relationships as it relates to having a productive, meaningful life, if you would.
Yeah, so I'll go over what they are in just a second, but let me lead off by saying this. In the manual, there was a fabulous, what we call a truth. And the truth said this, or says this, you need people more than they need you. Then it goes on to say, the same truth goes on to say, no one ever achieves their true maximum potential alone. And so you think about that, and you think about the people in your life. And remember, I said earlier, and I'm going to repeat this because I think it's really important, you are a product of your environment. So do you have a supportive environment, or do you have a destructive environment? The 5 categories, if I remember, you've got mentors and role models. Your mentors and your role models, of course, that would be in every area of your life, not just your business mentors or role models, but your spiritual mentors and role models, your financial, all of that, your health, all areas of your life. Who are your role models and your mentors? Your love relationships. And then and most people kind of get those 2 okay. They understand them. It's not that they're very conscious of them. But the ones they're less understanding about are your wealth relationships, your wealth determiners. Who are you determining wealth for? And who's determining wealth for you? And then finally, the last category our affiliates or associated acquaintances, kind of the people in your life who are there. They help you, they plug in, but their relationship with you is not, it's not nearly as deep or as critical to you as your wealth determining relationships. And so when you look at it, if you look at it visually, and there's nothing magical about how many, but when we look at the visual in the manual, I think there's 43 positions, so to speak. And so I tell people, I say, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to get a big piece of paper, and I want you to, right across the top of it, I want you to have 43 columns. Create 43 columns and label the columns just the way this visual labels them. You'll have 5 to 7 mentors and role models. You'll have 5 to 7 love relationships. You'll have 1 to 3 people you're determining wealth for, and 3 to 5 people who are determining wealth for you. And then the affiliated relationships, there's like 20. I said, put it all on a piece of paper with every column being labeled. I said, now go back and start and fill in the columns on who's got that position in your life. And if you can't fill in a name, or in some cases 2 names, just write the word vacancy. Just write that word vacancy. So now you've got a visual of the holes, so to speak, in a wealthy person's life relationships. Where do you have holes?
I think so many times we apply the word wealthy towards just, the financial aspect. And when we really think or use the word wealthy and these circumstances, we're talking about a wealthy, abundant life. It's not necessarily just the financials. And the thing I really appreciate about this process is now being intentional about who is it that we are seeking out to be in our life, who are we electing to continue to allow to be in our life, knowing the dramatic impact that it has on the outcome of and the experience that we have, while on this globe, right?
Right. We want a wealthy life in every area of our life.
Aspect. Yeah. Yeah. So much of this material feels, so personal, yet it has had, I've seen it have, and I'm sure you've seen it have such a dramatic impact on people's businesses. Why do you think that's the case? It's, such a profound impact on their professional life when they're spending this focused effort on, really a personal conversation.
Well, one thing I realized early on in my real estate career, I'm not saying I put all of these pieces together, but I saw right away, because I did do about a 2-year stint as manager of that traditional office that I started with. What I realized was people whose personal lives were in trouble or were troubled or had things going on in their life personally that weren't going so well, their business would eventually suffer. And likewise, if people weren't doing well at their business, something would happen to them personally. You can't have one without the other. The 7, actually all 7 areas of your life are interrelated. And so I appreciate so much that one of the company's values is lives worth living. Well, lives worth living is so that you can have businesses worth owning. And careers worth having, businesses worth owning. Yeah, that's it. Careers worth having. Well, so I mean, we go at it and we leave lives worth living to the end. And in truth, if you could visualize this as an endless circle between those 3, the better your life is, the easier your business and your career will become. And in The One Thing, they have the book, The One Thing, they have like the 7 areas of life, and they ask you to rate those areas on a 1 to 10 scale. And then you look at it and see a visual of where you're out of balance. These are not 3 standalone or 7 standalone categories. They're dependent on each other.
Amen, brother. I think that's been one of the biggest realizations in my life, both from personal experience and seeing in others, that at some point, a dramatic deficiency in one of those areas will show up in the other aspects of your life. It's just, it's unsustainable to have something where things aren't good at home, not at some point show up in your professional life, and vice versa.
Without a doubt. 100% consistency. The only variable is time.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time, but it's going to happen.
So Dick, I can't tell you how excited we are to have you come into Salt Lake in April. Of course, April 10th, we will be at the Salt Lake Community College. It's the Miller Conference Center from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you will be teaching the Quantum Leap material. We're so excited to have you. If any of those that are listening today would like to get registered for this, again, just go to kwutah.com. Dick, are there any kind of parting thoughts that you would like to share with the audience about why to attend, or anything that is, really compelling about, the material that they should consider or prepare prior to coming to the event?
Yeah, a couple of the little exercises would be kind of fun for them to have prepared. If not, we'll spend a few minutes on it. But the more time you can spend on the exercises, the better. And so 2 of the exercises that we talked about was the strengths and weaknesses, your own personal strengths and weaknesses. I'll share one other quick one is we'll get to a goal setting. We'll do some goal setting, and goal setting can be personal goals or it can be professional goals, either one. But the process to achieve your goals that we use in our company, which I think is one of the most fantastic tools we have, is the 1-3-5. So we also call that the GPS: goals, priorities, strategies. And so if you have goals, be thinking about how you're going to achieve those goals. Be purposeful about the solution or the track that you'll run to achieve those goals. Again, both business and personal. If you don't have goals, that's a whole nother issue. We need to get you into a goal setting state of mind. One of the great questions I love to ask people is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, a lot of times people will ask me, professionally or personally? And I say, yes. Yes, both.
Well,
where do you see yourself?
Yeah.
Start with either one. But because we just talked about those 2 areas being interrelated, I think it's important to have both sets of goals, personal goals and professional goals. So we'll do that. We'll talk about the 1-3-5 and the 4-1-1. Those are tools that we have in our company to help you not just set goals, but really more than anything to achieve goals. And then the last thing that I want people who maybe to spend a little bit of time thinking about is your mission statement. What's your purpose in life? John Maxwell, the author John Maxwell, gave us a real kind of clue on how to figure that out. And he said, and by the way, it relates to one of our exercises. If you can decide what your strengths are, you'll be very close to understanding what your purpose is. And I thought, that's really interesting. Gary's mission statement revolves around his writing, teaching, and coaching. Well, what do you think Gary's strengths or passions are?
Right.
Writing,
Yeah.
teaching, and coaching. And that's how Gary, his mission statement is to help everybody around him reach their highest potential possible through my writing, teaching, and coaching. And that really pretty much follows Maxwell's kind of formula. Figure out what you're really good at. Now figure out how to use those to be significant in someone else's life. See, I love the idea. Zig Ziglar said it a long, long time ago. He's one of my mentors and role models. You help enough other people get what they want, you can have anything in life you want. This is such a great class. It is a great class to bring family members or friends. We've had that happen a lot of times. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I'm excited to be there in April. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't even touched on here. So I'm always excited to come to Utah and share with you guys.
Dick, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you so much for being on the show. Folks, that's our show for today. That's Real Insights Live. I just wanted to remind you, if you'd like to attend the full class of Quantum Leap, please go to our website, kwutah.com. Get signed up. It's on April 10th again, Salt Lake Community College. I can guarantee that it will be a day well spent. I'm very much looking forward to it. If you want to connect with Dick, you can certainly follow him on Facebook, facebook.com/Dick.Dillingham.7. So make sure you connect with him if you want to connect or ask any questions. I'm sure that we will also be following up on any comments as you engage with us over the next several weeks on the Facebook Live event. So we'd love to engage and answer questions. Next week, we have a really great show with Marcus Green and Johnny Christensen. Same time Wednesday, I think it is the 7th of March. We will actually be doing a 2017 year in review of the market here in Utah, along with projections for 2018. So some really great insight for things to come. If you want to watch or check out any of our past episodes, and certainly this episode as well, in the next handful of days, will be on our YouTube channel, kwutah.tv. And certainly make sure you continue to follow us, give us a thumbs up. And we love your comments at our webpage, or excuse me, our Facebook page, facebook.com/KW Utah. Boy, I'm going to butcher that one. And finally, I'd love to always connect with you on my personal page and continue the conversation there. So facebook.com/Matt Green Utah. Please connect with me there, follow along, and you will be notified of upcoming events. That's our show. Thanks so much. Peace, love, and whoa, lost my mic. Productivity. Thank you, guys.